Hello everyone and welcome back to another edition here of the GSMC Deadball Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. My name, as always, is your host, Christopher Shepard. Thank you all for tuning in on this lovely Friday afternoon and to conclude the week, which have a great show to kickstart your very sports-filled weekend, starting off by previewing the last two divisional round games in both the NFC and AFC that we didn't get to, the Rams and the Eagles in the NFC, and then the popcorn-worthy event of the weekend, Bills-Ravens over in the AFC. Then we're going to be kind of talking some CFP Championship game stuff, talking about the most important players, the top five taking place in the CFP Championship. Previewing another big game. It always seems to be a big game out west in the NBA. The Thunder taking on the Mavs after drastically different stretches and streaks in the past couple of weeks for both teams. And then conclude today's show with the bizarre rumors concerning Elon Musk and Liverpool FC. We'll be bringing all updates in that regard as well. But before we get into the show, as always, like, follow, and subscribe to the show and the network if you haven't done so already and you want to keep up to date with all of our new content, not just with my show, but other shows around the network. But if you want to contribute and interact with our shows a little bit more directly, consider making yourselves available to the Super Chat, Super Thanks, and Super Stickers features here on YouTube. Great way, as always, to get your input and opinions out on air. It is greatly appreciated by all concerned here at the network, and it just makes our shows that much better. And you, our faithful audience, are a big part of what makes this network go. But without further ado, let's jump right into our first segment, breaking down the first of two divisional round games we'll be talking about and previewing today over in the NFC. The Rams going up against the Eagles. And I feel like this game will have a very different look to it than the regular season one, in which the Eagles just ran roughshod all over LA to the tune of a 37-20 victory, with Saquon Barkley rushing for just over 250 yards and for 2 touchdowns. But ultimately, LA did improve over time, got healthier as well. And even though in that game, Puka Nacua did play with their leading receiver, I feel like this time around, it's more about the mental side of things. They overcame the barrier, the emotionality of that game in Arizona and against the Minnesota Vikings, and truly trounced one of the best teams on the NFC side of the bracket. A 14-win wildcard team they were able to take down. And so going into this one, they have a lot of confidence, and they're not afraid anymore of a team like Philly, who completely shut them down in the regular season. On the Philadelphia side of things, I kind of feel like in their wild card match against the Packers, things were a little bit too disjointed. They could have completely run away with this game, but there were some tentative moments where they didn't take full advantage of everything the Packers were giving them. Even when the Packers were down a couple of receivers, even when they kept on losing offensive linemen, you kind of felt like this game, if the Packers even had one or two players fully healthy, that they didn't in this matchup, then it would have felt a lot closer. And so, looking at this game on paper, it's a lot more evenly matched up than people might realize. The Rams, I do feel, have the defense and the ability to generate pressure that is needed against this Philadelphia Eagles offensive line that has been so excellent all year long. And I also feel like Matthew Stafford is the perfect leader of this offense, because he's not going to do anything silly in terms of pushing the ball down the field like what Jordan Love was attempting to do in the wild card round. He's a much more conservative guy, and he's going to take what the Eagles give him. Now, I know it's going to be a little bit more painful in terms of scoring points than what you were able to do against the Vikings, but I do think that points could be had for Los Angeles in the game, unlike what the Packers were up against, because of the health. The health is the biggest difference here, because I feel like we'd be talking about a very different game in the wild card round between the Packers and the Eagles if the Packers were fully healthy. Because while the Eagles have been so excellent, perhaps the best team in many people's opinions in the NFC, they're a little bit vulnerable in terms of how you can attack. On the offensive side of the football, just ask a lot of Jalen Hurts. Pressure him a lot and make him uncomfortable as a passer, and chances are you can potentially turn the ball over, force them behind the sticks, what have you. On the defensive side of things, I just feel like teams are a little bit too ambitious with how they play call against the Eagles. I feel like if you establish a dominant running game, which the Rams are kind of a little iffy on, it all depends on the play of Kyren Williams on that given day, but they can still get it going. And I think Kyren Williams is going to be a huge factor in both the running attack and the receiving game as well for Los Angeles. But ultimately, if you establish that run game, keep the linebackers who have been excellent all year long on their toes, then chances are a couple things will open up in the passing game. And since Matthew Stafford is more of an expert distributor than a downfield threat, he'll really appreciate that. He's not going to win this game just by throwing deep shots to Kupp and Nakua. He's going to win this game by sustaining drives and putting up points in that manner. And then the Eagles side of things. If you're approaching this game, I feel like the one aspect that you don't want to happen if you're the Eagles is Jalen Hurts getting blitzed like all hell. Because that means this Rams defense is generating the pressure they need to overwhelm you up front. Because this Philadelphia Eagles offensive line has run the gamut of facing aggressive opposing defenses. What they've done so well is adapt to the needs of this offense. It's a very run-heavy approach there in Philly, and even though Kellen Moore is a very ambitious offensive coordinator at times, he is more inclined and more comfortable, most importantly, running the football and establishing their dominance that way. But there are going to be situations in this game where Jalen Hurts is going to be asked to make a throw. And so, if you aren't establishing your dominance up front, it stems all the way down to your backfield and most importantly your quarterback. Because this Rams front is a little bit different than what you faced in the regular season all those weeks ago. This Rams front is motivated, it's young, and most importantly, it's hungry. This was a team that was seen as down and out 5 weeks into the season when they were 1-4. 9 weeks into the season when they were 3-6. But now they look revitalized, rejuvenated, and even in the face of all the emotions of how their city has been affected and the emotions of having to play their game away from their home stadium, they have gotten to this point, the sheer grit and resilience of this very talented young defense. And so, when I think about what the Rams can be able to do with guys like Verse and Fisk up front, and how the secondary can hold up with guys like Witherspoon and Kinchins in the secondary, I feel like this is going to be a much tougher task for Jalen Hurts to stay on schedule than, say, against a Green Bay Packers defense that really was a little bit too depleted to keep up with him. But ultimately, I think that this game comes down to both running backs here. If Saquon gets off on the right foot, gets into his usual rhythm, then chances are this Rams defense will look a bit slower than they did against Minnesota when Minnesota could not establish the run and Aaron Jones simply did not have the running lanes needed to create an impact in that regard. If Saquon can be the exact opposite of what Jones was, then this game has a chance to really get out of hand for the Rams, and they're going to have to be playing catch-up a lot of the time in it. But I can envision a game where both running backs are equally as important. I can see Kyren Williams being the guy in short yardage situations, whether it be running or receiving, being the difference maker as to how the Rams can extend and sustain drives and, most importantly, put up points. Because let's be real here. The Eagles are a team that on any given day can put up 30 to 40 points a game. But there are also days when they're so reliant on the run game that they don't necessarily put up as many points as you think. And that's what happened against Green Bay a little bit. They were focused on getting Saquon going. And yes, while Hurts made some timely throws that were the difference ultimately in that game, they really, really, really wanted to establish their dominance up front, which against the Packers defense is all fine and dandy because they are more known for generating takeaways than their pass rush, even though their pass rush was exceptional to finish the season. But the Rams really do entrust their pass rush and their front to get home a lot of the time. A lot of these guys are the difference makers for this defense. And yes, those secondary players who I discussed are highly capable of creating takeaways. But I do think that if you're Philly, the best way to stay on schedule is through the run game and for Saquon really wearing that defensive front of LA down. But in terms of predictions, I feel like this game is a little bit easier to predict than some of the others just because I feel like you know the difference Saquon can make in this game, whereas other players across other games, you don't necessarily know who's going to be important one way or the other. But I do know that Saquon is the hugest difference in this game, and what he's able to do for this Philadelphia Eagles offense is not only keep them on schedule, but score at ease himself. And that's the difference, I think, in a game where both defenses are going to come out hot. So, therefore, give me the Eagles in a very low-scoring affair. I kind of see this as a 17-13, 21-17 type of game where Saquon scores 2 touchdowns. The Rams' defense keeps it close, but potentially forcing a couple takeaways. But at the end of the day, it's Saquon closing it out on the ground just because of his utter dominance in that department. But I think this game could swing either way if Kyren Williams could get going on the offensive side of things for LA. But ultimately, I just think Saquon is too much of an X factor in this one for me to ignore him. But let me know what you think about this game, because coming up next we switch over to the AFC, talking about the last game of the divisional round, the popcorn-worthy event of the weekend perhaps, Bills-Ravens, Lamar versus Josh. An MVP decider, perhaps? Well, they've already voted, but who knows? We'll find out who I think is going to take this one right after this short break.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, some losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world?
Hello everyone and welcome back into the GSMC Dead Ball Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. Before we get into our second segment of today's show, I do want to remind you as always that if you wish to contribute and interact with the show a little bit more directly in other shows around the network, consider making yourselves available to the GSMC Podcast on that website, or the Super Chat, Super Thanks, and Super Stickers features here on YouTube as well. To get your opinions and input on air or leave a tip or donation, either one is greatly appreciated by all concerned at the network, and it just makes our shows that much better. Without further ado, let's jump into our second segment, previewing our final divisional round game in the AFC. The main event, people are calling it, the Bills-Ravens game. Oop, I did not mean to put it there. I will immediately fix this graphic down here, but this is a game of epic proportions. This is a game a lot of people wanted to see. Maybe coming a little bit earlier than people would have wanted. This would have been a great AFC Championship game, but alas, the Chiefs are just the Chiefs, and they are almost inevitable. But this is as good as any divisional round game you could potentially get because it's between the two primary MVP candidates, Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. And this is a rematch of a game that the Ravens completely dominated early on in the season, I believe in week 4, the tune of 35-10. Derrick Henry was running wild in that one. But ultimately, this game, higher stakes, and now the Bills have home field advantage, and I think this is going to come down to which supporting cast is ultimately better on the day. I do feel like these teams are so evenly matched, so dominant, that very little is going to separate them. This could come down to one silly mistake made by one of the teams. It could come down to a last-second field goal. It could come down to a defensive takeaway. But all I know is that it's not going to come easy. This is not going to be a Ravens blowout like it was in week 4. This is in Buffalo with a rowdy Bills Mafia behind their team, willing them to an AFC Championship game, a Super Bowl berth, potentially their first ever Super Bowl. This is not the safety of M&T Bank Stadium anymore if you're Baltimore. But I still think Baltimore are very much going to be in this game because their supporting cast is as dominant as any on the AFC side of the bracket. And it could be enough to see them win a Super Bowl. Let's talk about them first and foremost, because I think that a lot of people are thinking that because they're at home, it's the only way we can separate these two teams, and the Bills' home field advantage is fantastic. Why not have them winning? But on the Baltimore side of things, the reason why I think they can win this game and win much more this season is because of Derrick Henry. Because when we look at all the injuries the Ravens have sustained this season, I think Mark Andrews was injured a little bit early on this season. Now Zay Flowers was out for the first playoff game and for the last couple of weeks of the regular season, expected to be back in this one. I do think that the reason why this offense looks a lot more open than it ever was is because of the opportunities presented by Derrick Henry, not just in the running game, but in the receiving game as well. Because he is a physical brand of running back that a lot of NFL defenses are not used to defending over a full 4 quarters. And the irony in that is he might not even be needed for a full 4 quarters. 1 quarter of Derrick Henry's dominance could decide a game in Baltimore's favor. That's how good he can be in any given moment. Combine that with Lamar's dual-threat ability and the ability for this offense to attack you downfield with guys like Flowers, Bateman, Andrews, and Likely, and this team is going to be difficult to stop. And if I'm Buffalo, I'm starting to think that my defensive game plan has to be a little bit different than what we're used to, because the Bills, yes, dominated the Broncos defensively. They let up that first touchdown in the first quarter and completely shut them down after. But I do think that the secondary is going to struggle a lot to contain these receivers, and this pass rush is going to have its hands full up front in terms of trying to bring down both Lamar and Derrick Henry. But I do think that if there's a defense better than anyone at disguising coverages and being disciplined in zone, it is Buffalo. They're just going to have to go about it in a way where explosives simply cannot happen. And I think that's an incredible statement to say considering you're going up against Baltimore, because they live and die by the explosive play, whether it's on the ground or through the air, and Buffalo has been very prone to explosive plays. See their games against Detroit, Baltimore, and other fantastic high-powered offenses. But when I look at Buffalo and I look at their offense, what they're able to do, I think that when you put both of these teams together and compare them, it really becomes starkly clear that it's just a too difficult game to call. Even though the Bills supporting cast on paper looks wholly weaker than the Baltimore Ravens cast. I mean, Josh Allen, yes, is having an MVP caliber season and might just win his first award, even though Lamar has something to say about it. But when you look around, James Cook is an incredible running back, an underrated running back. Should have been a Pro Bowler, in my opinion, this year. Really helped my personal fantasy football team as well. When you look around, you have guys like Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman, Curtis Samuel, Amari Cooper, who has struggled mightily ever since coming over in the trade from the Browns. And then Dalton Kincaid, obviously a very special tight end, but ultimately not necessarily the sum of its parts compared to Baltimore's offense. You kind of start doubting them, right? We're saying, well, surely their time is up, because eventually a defense, much like the improved Baltimore Ravens defense, who really thrive in the secondary, in covering people, blanketing people, will really stymie this group. But that's the problem that a lot of defenses have with Buffalo. Since they don't have a true number one receiver, and Josh Allen is so incredibly good at creating out of structure, you can't really defend one superstar receiver, focus in on one superstar receiver. And so, even though Baltimore is so disciplined on the outside, with Marlon Humphrey and Nate Wiggins, and then you have roaming free safety Kyle Hamilton in the middle of the field, these Bills receivers don't care, because they're not looking to make the spectacular plays. They're looking to help Josh Allen. And sometimes Josh Allen is so good he doesn't necessarily need their help. He knows what he wants to do, even out of structure, which is scary to think about. So, even when you think you have slowed down this offense by slowing down the receivers, Josh Allen will make an incredible play, whether because of its own volition or because his receivers are so connected with his play out of structure, that it will begin to frustrate you mightily. And so that's why I think when I look at this game, that could be a separating factor as well. Josh Allen's play out of structure and the ensuing understanding his receivers in terms of helping him in that regard. So when you take it at face value and look at both of these offenses side by side, how the running game of Derrick Henry combined with Lamar's dual threat ability and the downfield passing attack for Baltimore on the offensive side of things. And you look at the Bills, this group that's seemingly not as talented as Baltimore because of Josh Allen's sheer talent, really has grown around him and helped him grow as a quarterback. Both of these teams are really too dangerous to say, well, one of them can really dominate and that will be the end of that. I think just because Buffalo is at home, yes, you can be welcome to pick them anytime. But ultimately, I feel like it would be a true detriment to disregard one team just because you don't necessarily take them at face value. So, I'm presenting them to you like this, and ultimately, by the end of this segment, I will have made a prediction. But I just want to say, no matter what happens, both of these teams don't deserve to go out in this round. They are two spectacular teams amongst the AFC's elite that are going to stay there for a long time, and neither of them deserves to lose in a heartbreaking manner or in a blowout fashion, mind you. But no matter what happens, let's hope for an excellent game between these two teams. Let's hope that potentially Josh Allen wins his first MVP, and we're happy about it, or Lamar wins his third MVP, and we're happy about it, and he gets his first Super Bowl to prove that he's amongst the most elite quarterbacks in NFL history. But always remember, never pick a game because you didn't do the research. And both of these teams, yes, are very difficult to do research on because they're good at a lot of things and can really, on any given day, win a game through sheer force and talent. But that's not the scan it's going to come down to. It's just going to come down to who on the day is going to make more plays, which supporting cast will help their quarterback in a better manner. In terms of predictions, if you had to force me to pick someone, I'm just like many other people picking Buffalo because Rowdy Bill's Mafia is much different than M&T Bank Stadium. And I feel like that home field advantage is going to get a lot tougher for Baltimore if the Bills get off to a fast start, which I think they will. Because when I think about last week, yeah, they kind of started off a bit slowly. But I do think that they've learned from their mistakes and they're going to want to get off on the right foot here. And so Baltimore should be warned. The stadium is going to be loud. Buffalo are going to be primed and ready to go, and Baltimore is going to have to match that energy. So ultimately, because the energy is strictly on the side of the Bills, I have to pick them, but I think it's going to be very close, and I respect the Ravens mightily. I think this game's going to come down to a last-second field goal made by Tyler Bass with a score of 30-28. Let me know what you think about that in the comments, because it's such a difficult game to discuss and analyze, even predict, just because of how well-rounded both of these squads are. And I truly wish both of them the best of luck, even if they lose this match, because I do want both of these quarterbacks to win a Super Bowl and be regarded as one of the best of their generations. But without further ado, this ends the segment, and coming up next, we transition into the world of college football. That championship game is coming up. We'll be talking about the top 5 players who can make the most difference in that specific game right after this short break.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free.
Hello everyone, and welcome back into the GSMC Dead Ball Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. And for our third segment of today's show, we're going to be transitioning into the world of college football and taking a little bit of a look at the college football championship game and the players within this game. It's going to be a good one between Ohio State and Notre Dame, but I'm going to be discussing the 5 most important and impactful difference makers for both teams in this one as well. And this one took a lot of preparation, because I think that when you look at both teams, obviously they were a little depleted in certain areas. Some of these players have dealt with a lot of adversity, a lot of injuries throughout their careers, whether it be with Notre Dame and Ohio State or whether after they transferred in. But ultimately, all 5 of these players, I think, are going to be the most impactful players in their position groups in the entirety of the game for their respective teams. So without further ado, even though a lot of you might not be as skeptical about this list, or you might just be as skeptical about this list as other lists, this is my personal list and who I believe will deliver for their teams come Monday night. So without further ado, let's jump right into my top 5 most impactful players of the college football championship. Starting off at number 5. This guy is perhaps the most incredible running back in the college football playoff, just for his passion and determination. There were better running backs in the college football playoff just because of stats and things of that nature, but ultimately this guy has proven that passion and determination can get you far as well, and that is Mr. Jeremiah Love. He had perhaps 2 of the most impactful touchdowns of the entire college football playoff. The first being that 98-yard touchdown against Indiana, the first touchdown of the 12-team college football playoff era that immediately set the tone for how Notre Dame was going to play for the rest of the playoffs. A physical, ground-and-pound game on offense and complementary ground-and-pound defense. And Jeremiah Love exemplifies both, even though he only plays one position. And so I think that aspect of Jeremiah Love's play, combined with the touchdown he scored, the short yardage situation against Penn State, to really amp up Notre Dame, get them on top, and ultimately take them over the top, is something that Ohio State's going to have to defend a lot more vigorously than, say, a team like Texas, who was running game weakened as the playoff went on, or even Tennessee, where Dylan Sampson did not look like himself in that game, or Jordan James, who again did not look like himself. Because Jeremiah Love, no matter the odds, don't tell it to him, because he's always going to come with a passion and determination like any other running back in the entirety of college football, really, because of how special I think he is. So look for him to be a very impactful player on the offensive side of the football for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Then at number 4, this guy obviously got a little bit dinged up in that semifinal game against Texas, but I do think out of all the linebackers on Ohio State's roster, he is the one that really is the engine of that linebacking core. And while Jack Sawyer, who has really made himself an Ohio State legend with his big plays and pivotal moments, has really stepped up, and Cody Simon, shout out to him, my fellow St. Peter's Prep brother, has been a tackling machine. I do feel like this guy really is the glue that holds them all together, the master communicator at the linebacker position for them, JT Tuimoloau. He's going to be an incredible NFL talent, JTT, and I feel like even though he may not make as big of plays as Sawyer and Simon do, he keeps them together. He's the cohesion that they need. And whether or not he has a big game really doesn't matter, because he impacts the game in so many different ways. He may not even have to prove it on the stat sheet. He allows guys like Sawyer and Simon to get home. He allows turnovers to be generated, right? And he's a big part of why they've gotten so far in terms of for where they were against Michigan to now. Jack Sawyer and Cody Simon be pulling the strings, but JTT is the master puppeteer. But I feel like in this matchup, it will come down to, say, stopping a guy like Jeremiah Love, who we already talked about, and JTT might be bigger in that effort than he might have been in others throughout the college football playoff. So look for him to be one of the most impactful defensive players for Ohio State, even if Sawyer and Simon seem to be the stars at the linebacker position, even in this game. But then, at number 3, this is where it gets a little bit controversial, because this guy, yes, he's not the sexiest option of any quarterback in the college football playoff, but he is the most gritty, and he is the most determined, and he never takes no for an answer, and that's why Notre Dame are where they are right now. So whether you like it or not, Riley Leonard is going to be the third most important player in this college football playoff championship. Now, I know a lot of people are thinking, well, he has a lot of deficiencies for someone who has spent his career in college with Duke and playing well there and going over to Notre Dame and not looking as good. But if he wasn't gritty, if he wasn't determined, Notre Dame would not be where they stand, because they don't really care if Riley Leonard turns the ball over more than other quarterbacks. They don't care if Riley Leonard makes big mistakes. What they care about is that he compensates for them. What he care about is he goes back out on the field and comes out with the same aggression and determination as all the other players around him. What they care about is that he's an ultimate leader as well. And that's what have gotten them to this point. And so you can say that Riley Leonard might not be the best in terms of arm strength. You may say that he might be the best in terms of accuracy, but he is the best in terms of willing his team to victory and giving them the plays they need in terms of pulling games out. Look at his game against Georgia. That game was a very tense affair for large portions, but Riley Leonard made the timely plays that they needed, and ultimately they were able to win that one. He did it against Indiana as well. He may not, like I said, be the prettiest passer, and he may not have the best weapons, but he'll make the big play you need him to. Look at that pass to Jaden Greathouse, even though part of it was because of that Penn State defender. Look at his runs, his timely runs against Georgia. Look at his runs against Penn State in timely manner in the CFP semifinal. So, while he may not necessarily be the best player on the field, he's a very valuable player to what Notre Dame does offensively. And they're going to need him to put in a Herculean effort here against a very tough Ohio State defense. But I do think that if Notre Dame either keeps this close or ultimately pulls out the upset, he will be a huge reason as to why. Let's talk about the other quarterback in this game. My number 2 most important player in the college football playoff championship. Will Howard, another guy with an incredible journey. At Kansas State for many years, played very well there, but had never got over the mountaintop, never made it to the Big 12 championship game. Actually, he did, but I don't necessarily think that he would have competed in the 4-team college football playoff era had they won against TCU there. But ultimately, now at Ohio State, with a very talented roster, very talented offense, Will Howard has really stepped into his own. And while he may not be like Riley Leonard, a guy who a lot of NFL teams desire, and he may not be, say, a 10-year starter in the NFL, he still is a fantastic college football quarterback with a lot of fantastic weapons at his disposal. And I feel like what he did in that game against Texas was brilliant. He knew that they were going to take away Jeremiah Smith. And so he really was able to execute a perfect game plan that attacked the middle of the field and really allowed Ohio State to take control of that game. And in the critical moments, like I said, he may be prone to mistakes, but in that game against Texas, he made big decisions matter. He made that 4th and 2 matter. That extended that drive and ultimately was the difference in that game. So look for him to both positively and potentially negatively impact Ohio State. Positively, let's say Notre Dame follows Texas' blueprint and goes in his own coverage to protect against the big play to Jeremiah Smith. Will Howard can do the exact same thing he did against Texas, potentially make more mistakes. But whether or not it's positive or negative, Will Howard is the second most important player just because of how he controls the destiny of this offense. Because, yes, you have all the weapons around him, but you need a general. You need a quarterback. So Will Howard really needs to be very impactful and make huge decisions in this one concerning his play. But, unfortunately, he is not the most important player in this game. It is one of his wide receivers we've already talked about, and who everyone knows to be one of the best wide receivers in all of college football, and the reason why Ohio State is here in the first place. Jeremiah Smith. This young man has truly elevated his game in the college football playoff to the point where he might just be not just the best true freshman receiver in college football, but the best receiver this season in all of college football. In the first 2 CFP games, 290 yards, 4 touchdowns, incredible stat line. And yes, he was locked up against Texas. But look at what Texas struggled to do in order to deal with him. They struggled to close in the middle of the field, and it opened up a lot of weapons like Emeka Egbuka, Carnell Tate, G. Scott for Will Howard to throw to in that area of the field. So, either way, whether it's positively with his downfield threat or quote-unquote negatively, and even negatively, he's still opening up space. Jeremiah Smith will have a huge impact on this game. Because let's say Notre Dame decides to stick to its identity, play man-to-man coverage. It's a very risky thing to do against a guy like Jeremiah Smith. But if they shut him down, you better hope that your receivers or that your linebackers or secondary, if you're Notre Dame, are able to keep up with Emeka Egbuka, Carnell Tate, and other weapons in that offense as well. Because they've already given the blueprint of how they're going to attack you if you take away Jeremiah Smith. Okay, we're just going to utilize all our other fantastic weapons. So Jeremiah Smith is the ultimate important player in this college football playoff championship just because of how he impacts the game completely for both Ohio State's offense and Notre Dame's defense. He completely alters your perception of how to defend him time in and time out, because Texas perhaps did the best job of anyone in the playoff, but Notre Dame isn't Texas, and they probably won't be. So look for Jeremiah Smith to have a lot of opportunities downfield, and ultimately for him to dominate this game, or for Notre Dame to change their ways and for other weapons to dominate this game. So either way, Jeremiah Smith, I'm saying, is the number one most important, impactful player in the CFP Championship. Let me know what you think in the comments, because I made some very tough decisions here. I could have put in guys like Sawyer, guys like Cody Simon, but ultimately my list came about just because of how they could impact this game. But let me know what you think. Is coming up next. We transition to the world of basketball. Another big game out west. Two teams heading in seemingly different directions. The OKC Thunder and the Dallas Mavericks. We'll be right back to talk about this game right after this short break.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts.
Hello everyone and welcome back into the GSMC Dead Ball Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. And for our fourth segment of today's show, we're transitioning into the world of basketball. It seems like all the good games in the NBA are taking place in the Western Conference. It probably is the better conference, but it seemingly is like we're constantly talking about the Western Conference on my show. But this game is an interesting game that I wanted to bring to your attention in the NBA, because it's between two teams headed in seemingly different directions. The OKC Thunder, who have been red hot, and the Dallas Mavericks, who have been ice cold in the month of January. And when I think about this game, I think about two words: 38 days. Because 38 days ago, the Mavericks became just one of 6 teams to beat the Thunder this season. A resounding 118-104 victory. And then, in the ensuing 38 days, both of these teams went in completely divergent directions. Let's talk about the Thunder's journey to this point thus far. After that loss, they won 15 consecutive games, only snapped just over 1 week ago against Cleveland. Last night, they beat Cleveland in resounding fashion in a game where Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, their MVP candidate point guard, scored 40 games. Lou Dort, one of the best one-on-one defenders in all of basketball, scored 22 points, and another young star in Jalen Williams scored 19. That extended their current winning streak to 4 games. And then in terms of the Mavs, well, things went very poorly, because in that game, the Mavs were a fully healthy basketball team. And tonight, it looks like they won't be. During that 38-day span, Luka Doncic injured his left calf and will be out for the foreseeable future, potentially until early February. Kyrie Irving has dealt with a lot of back issues. Could be expected back tonight, could be available for the game, the Mavs say, but I'm not holding my breath. And then Derek Lively II, just recently suffered a sprained right ankle, was out for that one game, that tough loss against New Orleans a couple days ago. And now we're looking at the Mavs having a 3-game losing streak and having lost 8 of their last 10. So like I said, 2 completely different directions after that game. Now let's talk about the Thunder, because the Thunder are an excellent team in every regard. They're number 1 in terms of defensive rating. Look at all the players they have. No matter whether they be role players or starters, all of them are excellent. They signed Alex Caruso in the offseason, one of the best perimeter defenders at the point guard, shooting guard position, what have you. Lou Dort's an incredible defender. Cason Wallace on their bench. And let's not forget about Isaiah Hartenstein, who might miss this game because of a calf injury, but it might not even matter, because they're also 6th in offensive rating, led by SGA, who, if it weren't for Nikola Jokic's exploits with Denver, could be the leading MVP candidate. He leads the league in points per game with 31.6. And you get all the stats right, 6 assists and 5.4 rebounds. A truly remarkable player leading the charge for OKC offensively. Now let's look at the Mavs. I do think that a lot of people underrate the Mavs' depth. I do love Daniel Gafford. I do love guys like PJ Washington. But ultimately, they're not players who can carry the load for this Dallas team when guys like Luka and Kyrie are out. They're players who supplement and complement Luka and Kyrie, which we saw in the playoffs last year. And remember, in the playoffs, they were a big reason as to why the Mavs beat the Thunder in their second round series. But now, they might be carrying a much heavier workload against perhaps the most dominant team in the NBA right now, coming off a resounding revenge game against another hot team in the Eastern Conference, the Cleveland Cavaliers. So, if I'm the Mavs, I'm praying that at least Kyrie Irving can play. Because looking at this squad, yes, there are points there. Daniel Gafford can have a good game. He's an underrated center in the league, underrated big man, and PJ Washington's a passionate player on both ends of the floor. But you can't beat the Thunder twice. And I'm saying that now. And you certainly can't beat the Thunder twice if you're down your top 3 stars. So if I'm the Mavs, the only way I see myself winning this, or having a chance at the very least of winning this game, is getting Kyrie Irving, Daniel Gafford playing his absolute heart out on both ends of the floor, taking advantage of the minutes right when the Thunder might be playing small ball because Hardenstein is out, and I haven't really seen Chet Holmgren play that much in the past couple of weeks, and hope that the Thunder don't get fast break opportunities because that's when they're best, and just hope that you can, with your passionate defenders, match up well with them. That's the only way I can see how the Mavs pull this one out, because the Thunder have everything going for them, and those 38 days truly made a difference in how both of these teams are now approaching this game. But let's be clear here. I feel like the Mavs are one of those teams who, when they're down certain players, you certainly feel like they're down and out. And right now, they are a sinking stone in the Western Conference. They're 22-19. They're 7th. They're sitting right in the midst of the play-in spots right now. And there clearly right now is no direction upward. But think about the future. You're getting Luka Doncic back eventually. Kyrie's injury is not as serious as it looks, and Derek Lively potentially could be back as early as tonight. It's just a sprained right ankle. But if this game gets out of hand, which it very well could, you're going to have to preserve a lot of these guys, because I don't think these guys are used to, like Washington and Gafford, playing this long, this much in these games. So if I'm Dallas and I'm forced to play, say, Gafford for 40 minutes and guys like PJ Washington for 30 to 35, I really want to preserve their health as much as anything. Because if one of them gets injured and Luka and Kyrie get back and they carry you the next couple of games, the next couple of months, ultimately you want your guys who are your role players to be just as ready for the postseason as your guys like Luka, like Lively, like Kyrie. So this game, to me, isn't necessarily as important of a litmus test for the Mavs as people think it is, but I just want to highlight that situation as we get a comment from Lil Fettuccini 68 saying that the Rams are going to the Super Bowl. They very well could. I hope to God they don't, as a Seattle Seahawks fan, but they have the talent, they have the spirit, they have the passion, they have the city behind them, and I feel like they can beat a Eagles roster that is performing a little bit above its head at the moment. I don't necessarily think they're playing all that well. And then if you go up against, say, the Commanders or Lions, as he also mentions, how can the NBA fix the All-Star game? I'll get to that after the Rams comment here. But I do think that ultimately the Rams are a team that can pull it off. You go up against the Lions, they have a depleted defense, and all you have to do is try and keep pace with them on the offensive side of things. So I do think the Rams might have a shot. I don't know if they're going to win, but ultimately they do have a shot at the Super Bowl. In terms of the NBA fixing the All-Star game, to be honest with you, it's one of the only things I really kind of watch in terms of the NBA, because I'm kind of caught up with all of the other sports, and NBA is a nightly thing, and the All-Star game is the first opportunity to get to see of a lot of these players. But I do think that at some point it got repetitive a little bit after the Elam rating, so in the Elam scoring system. So I don't necessarily know if there's a way people and fans will be satisfied in terms of scheduling, because they have to kind of fit everything in to a certain situation. But ultimately I think that in terms of fixing the format, you can tinker a little bit. You can have certain events scheduled in certain moments as well. So I don't know how that would help, but I do think like the less important events that people might care about, like say the Rising Stars game early on the weekend, say Saturday, and then the dunk contest All-Star game, things that people do care about the Sunday. But I do think that is an interesting debate as well. As he also says, as long as the Chiefs don't go back to the Super Bowl, I'll be happy. But we'll see, my friend. We'll see, because I do think that both of those takes, the Chiefs not being able to make the Super Bowl and the Rams going to the Super Bowl, are highly viable. And then he said the Commanders games have been really close lately. Yeah, I mean, if they do win, then I think the Rams would have a shot if they beat the Eagles, a lot more so than if they had to face the Lions. But I do think that would be another incredible NFC Championship game, the Commanders-Rams. That would be wild, because the Commanders are a team you didn't expect to be there, and then the Rams, even though, they had a rocky start to the season, are a team highly capable of going to the NFC Championship game. So it would be wild to see those two teams. But I feel like for now, I'm kind of erring on the side of both of the home teams here, with the Eagles and the Bills, and the games I predicted already. But thank you for your comments. In conclusion about this Thunder Mavs game, this game is more so about keeping up the momentum if you're OKC, and preserving the talents you do have if you're Dallas. Because I think ultimately this game is going to be a blowout for OKC. But it's all about how I believe Rick Carlisle is still the coach of Dallas, if I'm not mistaken. I'm sorry if I got that wrong. But all about him maintaining the fact that he needs his depth pieces in order for their next stretch run. Because, yes, they're definitely going to be in the thick of it once February comes, once Luka's healthy. So for now, hook your players as early as possible in this one, in a blowout like this, and hope that none of them get injured as well, because you're going to need them not just in the stretch run when you're fighting for a playoff spot, but in the postseason when they can really help you, much like they did last year. Let me know what you think about this game in the comments below. I think it's going to be an interesting one. But coming up to conclude today's show, we go over to the world of international football, specifically domestically, and the bizarre rumors surrounding Elon Musk as a potential buyer of Liverpool Football Club. We'll be right back to explain it right after this short break. Hello everyone and welcome back into the GSMC Dead Ball Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. And for our final segment of today's show, we're going to be going over to the world of domestic football and the bizarre rumors surrounding Elon Musk potentially purchasing Liverpool Football Club. Now, if I were a Liverpool fan, I would be a little bit concerned because, as we all know, Americans meddling in European football kind of gets a little bit weird and awkward. But I would also be a little bit intrigued in terms of how he would invest, because right now Liverpool's in a tremendous spot. They found the right man to succeed Jurgen Klopp. They're top of the Premier League, and yes, they have some contract situations to figure out, but they have a very young talent pool as well. I like the guys coming through their system, and ultimately they're in a good spot that if they find an investor like Elon Musk willing to put money into their efforts, then I would leap at this opportunity. But ultimately, there are a lot of complications with this, and it is just a rumor, and I don't necessarily think Liverpool fans will be happy either way. Without further ado, let us talk about this bizarre rumor in this term here. Because when I think about the impact a move like this would have on Liverpool, I think that it would be shocking, but it could also work in their favor, because the publicity surrounding that would really help Liverpool become an even bigger team. As Anthony Manzano said, how big sound of Atletico Madrid, so I'm wondering why is it that people give a lot more respect to Real Madrid and Barcelona, but Athletic gets overlooked even though they're in the top consistently. I do feel like in La Liga, it's Real Madrid and Barcelona, as he also mentioned he's a fan of Atletico Madrid. I feel like, Atletico is one of those teams who play a brand of football that is simply a little bit more unappealing than, say, Real and Barcelona. And I feel like Diego Simeone is not cast in a similar light as managers like Zidane and Ancelotti, and then for Barcelona, Pep, and managers like that, and Xavi. But ultimately, I do feel like Atletico, should they continue to push Real Madrid and Barcelona in the league this year, really have a chance to gain a lot more respect, just because they are doing it in a more attractive manner now. They have a lot of attacking talent up front. I love what Julian Alvarez has brought to this team. They're doing well the Champions League, so I'm really looking forward to seeing if they make noise and with La Liga and the Champions League make deep run there, how they look over here in terms of how they gain American respect. But going back into this Elon Musk situation and looking at how the future of Liverpool can be impacted, I feel like obviously if you're a Liverpool fan, you probably wouldn't know how to feel about it, because yes, with Elon Musk, he brings a lot of money. And if we look at the numbers here, Liverpool's current net worth is £4.3 billion, and Elon Musk's net worth is £343 billion. Now, obviously, he's not going to be investing all of that, but he's going to invest a large portion of that money. As Anthony Manzano said, so we think Atletico Madrid is almost playing a British and German style of football instead of Spanish. I guess you could put it that way if you think about it, for as long as the Simeone era has gone on. But now they are starting to evolve a lot more. They are starting to realize that attacking football, especially in cup competitions, really helps you as well. And I really like what they did in getting guys like Alvarez and Sorloth into their teams, because it really shows the ambition of them wanting to keep up with the big guns in Real and Barcelona. And Barcelona and Real, they are attractive football sides. They can play attractive football. But I think the problem is, because they're investing in some of the best players in the world, sometimes those good players in this squad don't necessarily fit together. And we're starting to see that with Real. And in the case of Barcelona, I feel like they're just, with Hansi Flick right now, adjusting to his style. And then he also asked how has Athletic evolved without compromising their great defense. That's an interesting question, because I do feel like great defense often gets overshadowed in La Liga. As he also mentions on the offensive side, without compromising the great stability on defense, I do think that if you're Simeone, you really hone in on developing your attack, but at the end of the day, you're still a defensive guy who can utilize his defense both offensively and defensively. I think that they have two brilliant wingbacks. I believe Molina is one of them. He's a brilliant player, both in the attack and defensively. So if he utilizes his wingbacks especially, that can really revolutionize this Atletico team. And I'm already starting to see it from the short kind of clips and portions I see of their games this season. But ultimately, I do think that the question you ask is more important to how Atletico looks in the future, and especially this stretch run in La Liga, where they firmly have the ball in their court, and how they're going to look down the stretch of the season, because they're right now in first, I believe, in La Liga, and Real Madrid and Barcelona are chasing them. So it's going to be interesting. They are a great time. I think that's their offense. They rely on counterattacks so much because their defense creating turnovers. They're not an attack first team. And I completely agree with you. But I do think that if this starts to become a little bit more of an attacking team, which I'm already starting to see in terms of how guys like Alvarez and guys like Sorloth impact them, I do think that the wingbacks are the best option in terms of how to utilize them in attack, but also continue to firm up your defense. But I do think that's a great point, just because Atletico for many years have been considered a very defensive-minded side, and not being able to create many chances, whether it be through counterattack or through the build-up. But ultimately, now, I just think that they're creating a little bit more diversity in that regard and becoming a team that are both dangerous defensively in the counterattack and in the build-up because of the ambitious signings they brought in this past off-season. But getting back into, and thank you, Anthony, for your comments. Let me continue to know, because I love talking football, especially international football, with all of you. But getting back into this Elon Musk situation, because I do want to break down what this means also for Liverpool's players. Because, like I said, they're in a situation where they're top of the Premier League, and they have a lot of contract situations, specifically with guys like Salah, Van Dijk, and Alexander-Arnold. And then this deep talent pool of a lot of youth coming through the ranks, that I feel like if Elon Musk were to buy this team and immediately start investing in building through this youth development, and then figuring out what they want to do with the likes of Salah, Van Dijk, and Alexander-Arnold, then Liverpool fans might not be as mad, because it's all about investing in the right areas and the areas that their fans really want to see grow. As he also mentioned, just a question being that the Dolphins are going to be playing Madrid for a home game. Do you think this may slowly set up one of these owners in Spain trying to buy an NFL team? I don't necessarily know if European owners are as passionate as American business magnates in terms of buying them, because we've seen a lot more of these American owners be attracted by these big clubs abroad. But I do think that, if anything, honestly, without spending Tesla is actually creating more of a loss in profit. I don't think this is a good idea for the British Soccer Federation to allow Musk to buy a team. I ultimately agree with you. I think it seems a little bit ludicrous and bizarre. I'm just going off the rumors I've found online concerning this potential purchase, but I do think I ultimately side with you, Anthony, in terms of Elon Musk and how he looks financially right now, in terms of all the money he's throwing into all his other business pursuits. So it really is one of those things where I just wanted to bring it to your attention and just kind of talk about what the future could look like for Liverpool should this bizarre rumor come true. But I do think that you bring up an excellent point. But going back to your owners abroad topic here, I do think that, if anything, the NFL should focus a lot more on international appeal before you start talking about owners from other countries being interested in buying teams. Just because right now, football is a much broader sport around the world than American football. So I feel like this is more of a move from the NFL to get more fans internationally to buy into the sport rather than owners. And then Anthony also says it's an American business magnate trying to buy a sports franchise between either Tim Cook from Apple or Jeff Bezos. That's who should buy this team that's up for sale you're talking about. It would be interesting if any American corporation, because as we've seen, you have Ryan and Rob, big Hollywood superstars, buying some Wrexham, and look how they're doing now, rising up the ranks in English football. And then you have someone like Todd Bowley, who at the start just seemed to pour money into everything, and all those signings didn't seem to click on the field for Chelsea. And ultimately, now, they're finally starting to coalesce. But I do think that it's always the question of, are these business magnates willing to pour a lot of money into a football club? Because running a football club as an owner takes a lot out of you. And if you've seen, say, Welcome to Wrexham, which gives you the perfect blueprint of how a football club is run, even at, say, a non-league level and now rising to the ranks of English football, it really is a complicated process. You really have to focus on what the fans want, and I'm not necessarily certain Elon Musk is in it for, say, the betterment of this team. I think that this could be a power move, and I think that, yes, he has ties to Liverpool, and it's currently owned by Fenway Sports Group, who is big in America as well. But at this current moment in time, it would be a little bit silly, and I know it's just a rumor, for people to completely invest in this rumor. Just because I'm not necessarily certain Elon Musk is for real here and going to make a real move of it in the coming weeks. But continue to know what you think about this, just because Liverpool seems to be in a situation where they have everything straight. They found Arne Slot, been doing an incredible job, and he doesn't seem like he wants to bow to anybody, and he's going to be very, very firm in his stance should a guy like Elon Musk come in. Ultimately, I feel like Liverpool should stick with what they know. I feel like they're in a situation where they can't lose at the moment, and whether or not, the contract situations get settled and these young players start developing, they're in a situation where a move like this would really hinder them rather than fully help them, because it never works right away for American business magnates buying European teams. I think that ultimately comes down to, as well, if this rumor is really going to be heard out and Elon Musk is completely serious about this, because right now all it is a rumor. But for the time being, I do think that Liverpool should stick with FSG, stick with the fans, and ultimately keep them satisfied. And right now they're doing a pretty good job of that themselves. That'll just about do it for today's edition of the GSMC Dead Ball Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. I've been Chris Shepard. Thank you all for tuning in to today's show. Thank you for your lovely comments as well. Continue to do that through the Super Chat, Super Thanks, and Super Stickers features here on YouTube. As always, like, follow, and subscribe as well. But that'll just about do it for today's show. We'll see you again next week at 3:30 Eastern Time for another edition of the show. But I'm out for this week.